I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Stansberry Radio Network.
This is James Altucher, and I'm actually introducing Jason SurfrApp. That's not his real last name. He sold his real last name. In fact, over the past 5 years, as he'll describe, and I'll let him describe it, he has sold bits and pieces of his identity for more than $1 million in total. And it seems surprising. And when I say identity, I don't mean he sold his soul or anything, but he like the logo on his shirt, his last name. He'll describe more. And what I think is fascinating about this interview is not that anyone can go out and sell their identity and make $1 million, but the guy is insanely creative about how he has chosen to make money. And everybody's got that creativity inside of them, and he's going to describe how he did it. So we're going to jump right into the conversation with him, which is why I'm doing this intro, because the podcast actually starts off right mid-conversation with him. But let's get into it. So basically, you sold $1 million worth of not T-shirts, but essentially you offered to wear other people's T-shirts for a day. So, and you sold $1 million worth of that. So an example is, I might want to buy JamesAltucher.com. You would wear a T-shirt with JamesAltucher.com, and I might pay like $100 to you, and that's what you did for like 3 years or 2 years.
Yeah, actually 5 years. But yeah, that's a good explanation, because a lot of people do think that I just sold a crap load of T-shirts when I actually did not.
Right, like, and I think that's a typical thing. Like, oh, I'm gonna make a bunch of T-shirts, go to LA, and sell them all. But you like basically sold your clothing. Like you turned yourself into a walking billboard, and that's what people paid $1 million for.
Yes.
And you did it in this really interesting way, where day one was $1, day two was $2, day three was $3, and day 365 was $365.
Yeah, it's funny. I kind of stumbled into that pricing structure through having an idea to sell it for $100 per day at first, and realizing that was only like $36,000 for a year. And I was like, well, that's making like half of what I was making in my 9-to-5 job. This is stupid for me to do it at this price. So I kind of shared, what I was thinking about with a couple friends, and one came back with the dollar per day idea, and he was like, what does this add up to? So I hopped in Excel, and I didn't know how to do any Excel summations or anything, so I just typed out 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 365, and then selected them all, and they added up to $66,000. And I was like, oh, that's a lot more attractive, and it's really interesting because it creates a sense of urgency where the pricing for the project became a piece of marketing, right? I mean, it wasn't just this is how much this thing's cost. It was get in earlier and it costs you less.
Well, and it's funny because the pricing structure, at least when you started, almost makes it seem like it's cheap. But like you say, it adds up to more than $100 a day. And $100 a day when you were first starting probably seemed very expensive to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with this guy, me, a nobody from Florida that has no credibility, has no social proof. I mean, no one knew who I was, and still no one knows who I am. But
That's not
that
true.
was and that was really interesting, right? I mean, $365 to me was not a huge amount of money that someone would spend on all the stuff I was doing on a day, because I wasn't just putting a shirt on, as you know. But it was still, when you start at $1, there's a lot of like coercing that you have to do to get people to understand that it is worth that amount. Later on, this is just a way to price it interestingly.
I don't know if you know this, and this is kind of off topic, but the issue you came across was a famous math problem.
Yeah. So over the years, yeah, I've had a lot of people send this to me like, have you seen the boat? And they send me this equation. I just laugh because I'm like, you don't even know. I hopped in Excel and like typed this out. I had no clue there was an equation for this.
Yeah, so like Gauss, when he was like, I don't know, 6 years old or whatever, his teacher was bored and didn't want to work, and his teacher just said to everyone in the class, add up all the numbers from 1 to 100 and turn it in. And he figured that would give him like an hour or two where he could just goof off. And Gauss, who's like 6 years old, handed in like 3 seconds later, handed him the answer, because it's just like if you add, I think it's just if you add all the numbers from 1 to 100, it's like 100 times 101 divided by 2, and that's the answer. So you
Right.
add 365 times 366 divided by 2, and that's your $66,000.
Even you saying that now still confuses the hell out of me. So
He had this nifty way of figuring it out. It's like,
that's amazing.
1 plus 100 is 101. 2 plus 99 is 101. 3
Right.
plus 90. Anyway, it's all on the side, but it's funny that you broke out Excel. So you had a third solution to the problem,
A
as
really
opposed to just adding it up.
a really terrible one, but it still got the end result. So
Right. And so you did that for 5 years. What'd you, just out of curiosity, I don't know if you mentioned this in your book, what'd you do on the first day of the second year? Was it back to $1 or was it $366?
yeah, so when I first thought of the idea for I Wear Your Shirt, it wasn't just a 1 year and done. I mean, it was basically like I wanted to create a new medium for advertising where I thought that, this human element to talking about brands and wearing a t-shirt was just the start of it. It was really just, hey, I'm a person and this is how I feel about this company. This is how I'm talking about them, because, people don't line up to watch a billboard change, right? Like no one stands underneath it and goes, oh, let's wait and see what new ad pops up. Oh, it's Tide, great. But people flock to the website because they want to hear a human being talk about their life and what they've got going on. And if a brand can be a part of that, that was great. So, I saw an opportunity, or at least I thought I saw an opportunity where I could have like 10 people wearing shirts the next year and then like 15. And of course, it didn't work out that way, just like all kind of projections and revenue thoughts to go. But yeah, it was 2 people the second year at double the price. So it became $2 per day, basically for each person. And in the third year, it was 5 people at $5 per day. And in the fourth year, we kept that price because I really saw there was a pretty big like resistance to paying more than about $1,000 per day. Even to have 5 YouTube videos created, 5 people tweeting to their audiences, just 5 pieces of content all day long was still kind of, $1,000 per day was a big spend for companies. And I was in a really weird place where the small businesses couldn't afford it, and then big businesses, it wasn't enough of a spend. So I was like, this is really not great. And I kind of fell into, the decline of my business through my pricing structure, actually.
So wait, I want to get back to that because that's very interesting how you creatively tried to expand your business in different ways. But I wanna kind of still start with the highlights. So you essentially sold your body as a billboard for 5 years. to brands, and you successfully did this, and you sold, as you say, $1 million worth of yourself during this time, and now you've done something else which is very interesting and very creative. You sell your last name, so you used to be Jason Headsetsdotcom, and now you're Jason SurfrApp. Is that how you pronounce it, SurfrApp?
That is, you got it.
So did you legally change your name to JasonHeadsets.com?
I did. I actually went to the courthouse. I sat in front of a judge. I had a lawyer. It was very weird and awkward, and I felt very out of place because everyone around me was going through like divorce cases and child custody and like real life issues. And then here's me sitting like, I just had a crazy idea, and then like I'm going through with it, so I'm changing my last name. And so that the judge reading, I was really hoping he wasn't going to like read it out loud. Luckily, he was like, "Oh, last name petition," and called up my previous last name, which is Sadler, which is normal. And so I went up there, and he asked me a bunch of really like penetrating questions about bankruptcy and felonies and stuff, none of which I had done, but that was the question.
I see, because, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but he asked
Yep.
you these questions because some people try to change their names because they're trying to avoid a Google search on a prior felony or something.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and it would have been nice if my lawyer, or no, he did tell me a couple of those things, but I just don't think I was prepared to like stand in front of a group of people and have those questions asked. Even though I hadn't done it, it was still super awkward. But yeah, so it was legally changed twice. My license right now says Jason SurfrApp. And
Like if you
fun
travel
fact,
out of the country, does your passport say Jason SurfrApp, or you'd have to get a new passport?
so I knew I didn't know how long I was going to do this last name change thing, and so I've done it twice now, and I'm not going to do it again. But I didn't change my passport, and I haven't traveled out of the country since 2012. And I don't know, I was kind of nervous that if I kept changing my passport every year, it would just be a big red flag, and no one wants to get the like extra airport security check. So I was like,
Right.
I think I'll leave my passport until I finally decide on what I'm going to stick with for the rest of my life.
Right. Although when they put it in the computer, don't they kind of like, there's no Jason Sadler. Like it won't add up. If you actually traveled out of the country, I bet you'll have a problem with your passport.
Great, thanks, James.
I just wanna point out problems before they happen. I'm looking out for you, Jason.
I'm already nervous for the white gloves, but now I'm extra nervous. No, yeah, well, I'll change it. When the end of this year, once this SurfrApp term is up, I've got a name I'm finally going to pick, and then I'll change the passport, and I'll keep that name for the rest of my life. So
Okay, and I'm gonna get to that in a second too. JasonHeadsets.com. How much did Headsets.com pay you?
So this is really interesting. I had done a bunch of research, which you can imagine, people selling their last name. There wasn't a lot of stuff that came up, and there wasn't.
Probably nothing came up.
Nothing came up. I even went to like the third page of Google, which is like extensive research when you get that far in.
Yes.
And so
That's like hard work.
it is. So yeah, I bought the domain buymylastname.com, which shockingly was available. And I started an auction because I figured that, just setting a price for it seemed really arbitrary. And I didn't think like the dollar per day pricing thing that I had used for years would work. And I was kind of tired of it anyway. So I said, I'm just going to do this as an auction. I'm going to set it for 30 days. I'm going to start it at $0 because I think that's going to be kind of cool, and see where it goes. And in the first 24 hours, it got up over $30,000.
You're kidding. Who was bidding?
Lots of people. There were board game companies. I think Lewis Howes. I think Lewis Howes.
Yeah.
He bid on it. Some realtors in Canada. It was really like 4 realtors in Canada. Very weird. No realtors in the U.S. I don't know what happened there. Yeah, just a bunch of companies.
I could tell you.
So yeah, there were probably about 40 different bidders in the first 24 hours. The price started, $5 was a bid, $20 was a bid, and then it got up to like 2,000 and then 5,000, then went all the way up. So headsets.com actually ended up, they bought it at $45,500 on the last day of the auction, in the last minute of the auction. There was a little bidding war at the end. And so they ended up winning it for 45 grand.
Do you think there was a little bit of the auction fever in there that people kind of get into the game-like aspects? So rather than having a true eye on return on investment, they got into the idea that I want to win this auction?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was really interesting because I'm familiar with eBay. I actually in college bought and sold a lot of cell phones on eBay. And there was like the lull of the auction was like 2.5 weeks where there wasn't any bidding at all. It was just dead. I felt like I was in the desert. And then in the last pretty much like 48 hours, there was more bidding. And I knew that was going to happen. But when you're putting your last name for sale on the internet and it's, nothing's happening for 2.5 weeks, and it was really kind of scary because I was like, all right, well, it may not go up anymore. And this is kind of not an exciting story, but luckily it did.
So how did you start off the auction? Did you start off by calling your friends and saying, "Hey, put in a bid and we'll see what happens"?
Yeah, so over the years, I've really learned a lot about kind of building buzz and, launching projects. And so, I pretty much went to, my email list, and, it was a couple thousand people. And I said, hey, I have a new project launching. I'm not going to put it on this email list because I use this for like my I Wear Your Shirt stuff and other things. Sign up for this new list. And there were only about 600 people, through posting, people to sign up for this new project. I didn't tell them what it was. I just said it was a new project I was launching. So that list is where I went first. That was pretty much how it started. And I reached out to a couple close friends, like anybody does when you're launching something, and said, hey, would you share this? Most of them didn't respond, which is okay because we all get busy and no one, everyone gets those requests. But yeah, that 600 person email list really kind of catapulted, that site forward, and kind of got it shared everywhere.
So did you get any while the auction was happening? Was there any publicity on this? Like, did you get in the news?
Yeah, so over the years, I've worked on and off with one PR company for my own personal stuff. I've worked with lots of PR companies for other companies' stuff, but this one company, Asylum PR, they were kind of on board with me from the start, and so they started pitching it once some bidding happened, because just the idea of it is not really pitch worthy. But yeah, we got some pretty good early press, especially after the first 48 hours. CNN Money picked up the story, and it was on the homepage of CNN. And there were, Huffington Post picked it up. There were a bunch of people that picked it up early. Adweek picked it up. And so there was some really great traction up front. And I didn't really think that press was going to do too much, just because I've actually had a lot of good press over the years, and I've noticed that none of it really does much of anything, to be honest. And if people who are at press companies listen to this, I'm sorry, but
No, it's totally true.
yeah.
I've been involved in 20 companies. I've hired multiple PR firms. I have never seen any article or even a TV appearance that actually has made a dent in my revenues anywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, I was on the Today Show, and I literally thought that was going to make my business. And I wrote about this in my book. And actually, a local story here in Jacksonville, Florida, where I live, got syndicated to like 27 cities around the U.S., and that made more of an impact than the Today Show did, especially financially. So yeah, CNN picked up. So the good thing about that PR, and I could actually track this back, which is awesome, because most of the time PR, you can't see a return on it. The PR company getting the Buy My Last Name story on CNN, the CFO of Headsetsdotcom, that's how they found the auction, and they were the ones who ended up winning the bid. So I can directly correlate.
But PR firms are pretty expensive. So, like, how much did you pay the PR firms over the course of this auction?
Yeah, I don't even know if they care if I say this, but I will, because I'm a transparent guy like you. I just told them I would give them 10% of whatever the final auction price was. So we didn't pay anything up front. It was basically, the harder you work, the more people you can get to bid, the more money you can make. And I'd worked with them over the years, so they were a really cool company, kind of happy to work on a crazy project like this.
So, and I'm going to get to your costs on your various different business ventures in a second, but overall, selling your last name was profitable. You spent $4,500, you made $42,000 or $41,000, and then all you had to do was the expenses of changing your name.
Yeah, about $1,500 in name change stuff between a lawyer and the court and paperwork, and then I donated another 10% of the auction price to a charity each year. So really, I walked away with about 75% profit, on that project.
Not a bad margin. It's sort of the dream of the internet to have a high margin business like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So then you switched from Headsetsdotcom to SurfrApp. How did that happen?
When I sold my last name the first time, I didn't have intentions on doing it again. I just thought it would be, this is a crazy thing to do. My mom had gone through a divorce, so that's why I did it in the first place. It wasn't just because I wanted to do some gimmicky thing. I had like a personal reason, and I had multiple last names throughout my life. So I was just going to do it once and then pick a last name after that. And actually, in the first 3 months, Headsets.com had a $250,000 increase in sales from all the PR and from all the attention. This was, when the auction finished, it was everywhere. I was on Fox and Friends. It was on the homepage of USA Today. I mean, they actually saw an actual good bump in money, which is great. I mean, they're a big company, but still, they could see that bump. And when I heard that, when they told me all that stuff, because I didn't know, all I saw was the stuff from my side. I was like, you know what? I think I could probably do this again. I've been thinking about writing a book for a long time. The byline of a book seems like a pretty valuable space that a lot of people just, their name goes there, and everyone knows their name when they're attached to a book. So I think that I could do this a second time. That'll be the last time I do it. Kind of the big offering here is I'll change it everywhere like I did before, but also put it on the byline of my book, which I think is a pretty interesting spot.
Right. So your book is Creativity for Sale, and the subheading is How I Made $1 Million Wearing T-shirts and How You Can Turn Your Passion into Profit Too, by Jason SurfrApp, formerly Jason Sadler, and Jason Headsetsdotcom.
I know I have like the longest byline ever.
No, I love it. And the guys who make your book, Roundtable Companies, they did my comic book, The Altucher Confidential.
I did not put that together, and I'd seen your comic book on their desk when I'd gone into meetings, and I remember seeing it. And then after my book had come out and we started chatting, all of it came together. So I have your comic book downstairs. I actually just got Choose Yourself as well. I loaded up on my Altucher reading. But yeah, very cool. Small world.
So it's funny though. You say creativity for sale, and what really though, and you allude to this a little bit. It's almost like you were selling your. It's almost like you've been on a quest for your identity, because it's like you say in the book. You were Jason Sadler because your mom married your stepdad, and I guess you kind of imply you changed your name to your stepdad's last name. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then now that she was getting divorced from him, you had no last name that you felt emotionally attached to. So I sort of see this as, not only was it an incredibly clever way to make money, and obviously it was very profitable to you, but it's kind of combined with this. You were almost kind of reaching out and searching for your own identity. Like, who were you? You were Jason something, but you didn't know what it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. My girlfriend Caroline, who's just been amazing inspiration for me throughout all of my projects. When I started doing the last name stuff and like writing the copy for the website, she helped me write a lot of that copy, because I'm so bad at writing copy for myself, like about myself. And I can write a blog post on anything. That's fine. But when it comes to like describe yourself in 5 words or whatever, I'm just so bad at it. So I actually told her, I was like, will you do me a favor and take a crack at this? And she wrote a line basically on the website that was, I've never gotten my sense of self from my name. I've always gotten, my identity through the things that I've done in life, through my projects, through my hard work, through everything else. And it's so true, James. I mean, I really, I think like everybody else, you kind of float through life, and you go to college and you're trying to figure out what you want to do. And I got a job and I didn't like that job. And I just, I kind of felt lost in the world. I didn't know where my place was. And all these crazy projects really fulfilled me. I mean, it really makes me feel like this is what I'm meant for. These are the things I'm really good at. They're really hard. They're not easy. And a lot of times they're really stressful, but I get the most enjoyment out of doing them. And so selling myself creatively through all these different projects has really been fun. And it really has created, I'm that guy, right? I mean, that's what I'm known for. So I do really enjoy it.
Well, it's funny because, the internet has allowed us in general to transform the way we look at ourselves and the way we look at the world. And traditionally, of course, you identify yourself by your, the name of your father and his father and his father and so on. And that's your last name. And that's how we've done it all the time. But you've been finding more identity in your creativity, and so you literally chose to name yourself as an outlet of your creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So Caroline, your girlfriend, she hit it dead on in the copy. I mean, if I'm just thinking out loud, if I was writing this copy, I would have just simply said, I have no idea what my last name is or what it should be, and I need your help.
yeah, it's funny. We've joked about this a lot. Like, I wish I could just go to Jason, because that's what I feel most comfortable with. Like, I know I'm not like Madonna and I'm not Prince, and I don't, maybe I don't like deserve to have just a one name. but I don't feel like I need a middle name or a last name. I feel like this is like a societal thing that we have to identify people with so that you know which Jason is different from which Jason. But yeah, I just, I've had multiple fathers throughout my life. I've had multiple jobs, but all these things, like, none of that stuff has defined me other than just Jason, right? Like that's the thing that has defined me. So it's really interesting. And you brought up a really good point about, we look at our last names as like, this is our lineage, this is what we do, this is what we're, maybe destined for. And a lot of that, what your parents do is, for a lot of people, that's what they end up doing or something similar, right? And I just, not that I didn't like what my mom did, I always thought that there was something bigger for me out there. There was something different for me out there. Even as a little kid, I just was always kind of pushing boundaries and doing things differently and getting in trouble, not big trouble, but just I was always kind of different and unique. And I think that's the internet has really helped me kind of put that out into the world.
Well, a couple of points on that. One is, I noticed in your book how, like, you met a guy, I think his name's Jason, also named Jason. You met him at South by Southwest, and
Yeah.
like suddenly you came up with ideas for. You're an idea machine, so you came up with ideas for him, and he made a business out of it, and he quit his job, and now he's making 6 figures a year doing the business you suggested for him.
Yep.
So essentially, you're and the internet's your tool chest, and you're an idea machine on this tool chest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm also in the interesting position where, and I've learned this about myself over the years, I don't just come up with ideas, but I execute them, right? There's that great quote that, like, ideas are great, execution is better, or whatever it is.
But
But
I'm gonna interrupt you there because I don't think people always say ideas are a dime a dozen. I don't think that's true. Not everybody came up with the idea. I mean, the internet's been around. The consumer internet's been around for over 20 years. Nobody came up with the idea until you did it 2 years ago or a year ago or whenever, to sell your last name. You were the
yeah,
first to do it, and it's an obvious idea. But so I don't believe ideas are a dime a dozen. Ideas are very hard, and execution is just a subset of ideas. Like, you have to have the idea, then you have to have ideas how to execute.
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, maybe it's part of that thing where you just don't give yourself enough credit because it's something that comes so natural to me. I mean, I don't have any problem thinking of ideas, right? I mean, I'm never at a loss of ideas or anything like that. So yeah, I guess it's just kind of the way that I look at the world and the way that I think.
So um you mentioned your mom a lot in your book and the advice your mom gives you, and you've always mentioned her favorably. I'm sure maybe she gave you some bad advice at points, but you only mention good advice she gives you. Why don't you take your mom's last name when you come up with your real name?
So this is interesting. My mom changed her last name to her parents' name, and so that'd be my grandparents. And while I love their name, that name's already going to carry forward with her. So, or whatever. And I don't know. I wanted to do something that was different. And so when I started, kind of earlier this year, started thinking about, what last name do I want for the rest of my life? I was trying to actually look deeper into my family lineage because I love my grandparents and they've supported me over the years, and I really appreciate that. But, where could I go further back? And actually, my great grandfather owned a power company in the 50s and was an entrepreneur himself. He was a serial entrepreneur, started multiple businesses, was a self-made millionaire basically. And I didn't know any of this until, I started talking to my grandmother about it and learning more about it. And I still want to dive even deeper because I just think it's so interesting that, maybe there's a little bit of genetics in this, right? Like, I don't know if it skipped a generation with my mom because she's not incredibly entrepreneurial. But it's really interesting that I've kind of taken the path that I have, and I didn't even know that about my great grandfather. So I'm going to take his last name, which I'm not revealing to the world until January 1st, because there are some things in life that I keep secret for at least a short period of time.
Sure. Well, now you're still a representative of, your Jason SurfrApp. I got to buy the SurfrApp still.
Exactly.
And
It's
look, I'm
free.
I'm
It's free.
I'm on the headsets.com website right now. It's beautiful. It's a clean website. I might buy myself a headset. How much did SurfrApp pay you?
So SurfrApp, so I did the auction again, started at $0, went back to that list, and pushed it out across social media like I did before. And the auction was, it was interesting. New York Times contacted me to do a story about kind of all the stuff that I was doing, and it just happened to be right in the middle of the auction for the second last name sale. And so, I put it out on Facebook and just said, hey, full transparency, I'm getting interviewed by the New York Times. if you wanted to bid, if you were thinking about bidding and you were going to wait till the end, now would probably be a better time. And I literally sat with a New York Times reporter and we watched like 30 bids come in. And SurfrApp was one of the ones that kept popping up. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And it ended up being a friend of mine that I knew who was basically starting this surfing app, which is kind of like Yelp for surfers, where they can log their sessions and find like places to surf and eat and help nonprofit organizations in countries around the world. And so yeah, they ended up through that that bidding time, they bid $50,000 to basically beat everybody out who was bidding during when I was talking to that reporter. And that bid stuck until the end. So their bid held strong at 50 grand until the auction ended.
So, it's interesting because, you mentioned a lot of things casually, like, oh, you're on the Today Show, the New York Times called you, you were on CNN Money, you got this PR firm. It's not that easy to get like the New York Times to call you and want to sit down with you for a bunch of days and write an article about you. Like, and reading in your book, you went to a lot of conferences. You were really kind of networking and putting yourself out there and already doing consulting and helping people. So you built up a network. You had 600 people on the email list for this. That's not a small number. You built up a network. Like, what would you recommend to someone who has absolutely zero, to build up? The first thing they should do to build up their network?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point you bring up. I mean, these things do come naturally to me, and I think a lot of them happen organically because of all the hard work that no one sees, right? Like you mentioned, right? Like all the networking, all the putting in the years of effort. The time when no one cared at the beginning of I Wear Your Shirt, when no one even cared that it existed. But yeah, so stuff for people out there who want to do these things. They want to reach out to, or they want to get seen by big media outlets or whatever. And where I started was just reaching out to my contacts and just asking people and saying, hey, here's a project that I'm working on. Here's some social proof for the project. Maybe something's happened. Maybe something's, someone's been on board with it. Do you know anybody who might be interested in talking about it? And I'll send those personal emails. I will not mass email people, especially people that I know and trust. But I go to those people first on every project that I do, on everything that I do, because someone always knows someone, right? I mean, it's that couple degrees of separation that we just don't even know exists with our friends. And my first New York Times interview back in 2009 was one connection away, and I didn't even know it existed. I started asking people if they knew anybody that would talk about I Wear Your Shirt, and someone's like, yeah, I know a New York Times reporter. I went to college with her or whatever, and gave me the introduction, and sure enough, that was my first gigantic media outlet that interviewed me. And yeah, so it's really just starting with your existing context, and people devalue their existing list because social media is so attractive, and the virality of Facebook and Twitter is so amazing, and it's not. What's amazing is the trust that you've built with people over the years, and that those people are willing to put their neck out for you and recommend someone to you who will actually do you a favor and help you.
I think that's really true. Like, I've noticed this. I always have a hard time asking people to do me a favor. Like, I feel like a lot of people are like that. You become much more of a giver than an asker. I don't want to say taker because that has a negative connotation, but it's hard to ask people to do a favor for you. But I found when I was doing this podcast, when I started doing this podcast, I didn't really know all the people I wanted to interview.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is that it is a pretty small world, and that most people, like they say, everybody in the world is 6 degrees of separation from each other, but actually most people that you'd like to know are probably more like 1 to 3 degrees of separation from you, and even more like 1 or 2 degrees of separation. And I find that's true. Like, even the most incredible people are only like 1 or 2 degrees of separation away.
Absolutely. And like the phrase that has come into my brain over the years is you don't get what you don't ask for. Right. And this applies to like every project I put out into the world. It's me asking to get paid for something really weird, but it's also in the connections to meet people that I didn't know or anything. And if you don't ask, you can't get whatever that thing is. And people are afraid to ask. And I think that's because asking has become, especially through like Twitter, I mean, it's just like every company is asking for you to buy their stuff at this discounted price. And that looks like the ask. I mean, that doesn't have to, you don't have to ask things like that. You can ask them in a personal way. You can ask them in a way where you really just want to get help, or you want to get things. And I think that's been the big thing for me, that I've just never been afraid to ask for stuff over and over and over again, and sometimes to a fault, and sometimes it gets me in trouble, and sometimes it gets me awesome things, but I'm just not afraid to ask.
Well, you mentioned something that you didn't like. For instance, when you were emailing your contacts, you sent personal emails. You didn't send a mass email to your contacts. And so what that suggests to me, and this is what I'm discovering also, is that asking is kind of part art, part science. Like, people say, oh, it never hurts to ask. But that's not really true. Like, if you just kind of spam asked all your friends, it probably would hurt your relationships with your friends and your later asks of them. Like, you kind of have to go 90% of the way there so they can come back and say with that final 10% and meet you and say yes. Like, you have to work for the ask.
Absolutely. And you have to make it easy for the other person to say yes to whatever it is, right? I mean, if you make it hard for them and they have to do work, you're defeating the point of asking them for a favor. So, yeah, you're definitely right. I mean, whenever I send these emails, again, I try and show some type of social proof so that they say, they nod their head and go, yeah, okay, this is cool. I want to help Jason with this. Or, like if you're asking for, to interview somebody or to meet somebody, you probably say like, oh, I've interviewed these people so far. And so that they know it's a credible place if the person you're trying to reach out to for some reason has never heard of you. So yeah, you do have to do that and you have to be creative with it. And I think that's one thing where people are just lazy. And I don't mean to like lump everybody together in this like laziness, pot, but they don't want to put in the extra effort. They don't want to put in the work. And I don't understand why people, don't get it when they don't get the results they want, but they're not willing to put in the effort to get those results.
I think that's incredibly important. Like, to ask anything, even to give requires work because not
Right.
everybody wants what you want to give. But particularly to ask, you have to do almost 100% of the work in order to get someone to say yes. Now, you mentioned the phrase social proof. Can you define what that means?
Yeah, so social proof is something like, like I've name dropped, the Today Show and the New York Times and all that stuff. That's proof that I've been accepted socially by some other medium or platform or whatever. And that can be, if anything, if you're running a conference and you have, a sold out conference, your social proof is that you sold out your conference, whether that's last year or coming up. If you're a writer and your book has been on a bestseller list, you can say, I've been on this bestseller list. That's your social proof.
It's so true because I just went through this. I have a book that just came out, the Power of No, with that I wrote with my wife, and we were aiming to be on the New York Times bestseller list because it does, for no other reason than it adds that kind of social proof. And we ended up getting on the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, and we beat out everybody who ended up on the New York Times bestseller list, but for some reason, they have a different algorithm or it's curated. We weren't selected to be on the New York Times list, so it was kind of annoying. We got some social proof, but not everything we wanted.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. I mean, I didn't know if we were going to get to, publishing and book stuff on this, and you talk a lot about this often. But I'm a first-time author, and I went about writing a book in an incredibly different way than most people. And I don't know. I mean, I just don't care about those lists. I mean, I totally get that like being on a New York Times bestseller list is such a great thing to say, and it does add a lot of social proof and credibility to you. But I don't know. To me, I don't know. That was never important. I wasn't writing my book because I wanted it to be on that list. And it's to no fault to people who want to be on it because I think that that's a great thing and an amazing achievement. But you're right. It's a complete algorithm now. So it's being on that list is not what it used to be. Being on that list now is go spend $100,000 on some company that can get you on that list by buying a bunch of books around the world. And like what, now you're just basically buying the title, right? Well, why not just write the title? And then, who's going to call you out on it? Because at this point, the title really doesn't mean as much as it used to when it was real organic growth that got you on those lists. At least that's, what I've heard from the research that I've done. And I may be generalizing a lot, but, a lot of these lists, it just becomes how you can game the system to get to the top of those things.
No, it's really true. It's funny because I was sort of upset at myself after this incident because here I wrote my prior book was Choose Yourself.
Yep.
Where I'm saying ignore these old institutions and have your success come from within rather than from any kind of praise on the outside. And I was kind of not following my own advice, and of course, I was slapped for it. So I learned my lesson. But it's interesting with this book, that you wrote, Creativity for Sale. This is kind of your third creative idea that I want to point out, which is that you sold you sold an ad at the bottom of every page, and it's ingenious. Like I'm looking at page 41, and you have your whole page, and then at the very bottom, in a slightly different formatted text, startupsanonymous.com is a place for entrepreneurs to ask questions and share stories anonymously without fear of retribution. So you have an ad on every page.
I do, and it's interesting. I mean, I had never written a book. I started to really just. I had a lot of people over the years telling me, Jason, you've got such an interesting story. You should write a book. I was never really like a big writer. I mean, I wrote some blog posts and stuff, but nothing felt like I could write an actual book. And then I read, my buddy Paul Jarvis wrote, do you know what it takes to be an author? Just to write a book. You don't get christened with this phrase because you're born that way. It's just you just put words on paper and you become an author. And so when I started thinking about this, I reached out to some friends and I said, okay, so what's going on in the publishing world? Who's the big publisher I should reach out to? Like, how does this work? And actually, Chris Brogan, wrote me back and he was like, you don't need a publisher. Like, gone are the days of people needing publishers, especially when you have any amount of audience whatsoever. And even if you don't have an audience, you really don't need a publisher. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. And one thing that he said was like, don't plan on your book, making money. And a bunch of people said this as well, not just Chris, but your book's not going to make you money. It's just going to be a marketing tool. And I was like, oh, well, that's kind of frustrating because I'm going to spend months of my life writing this book and I'm not going to make any money off of it. Like, I get that I could make money long term, but that seems like a big waste of time. And I don't know. I don't like doing things that don't make me money. And I don't want to sound conceited, but I like to make money. I need to pay my living. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't work for a company. So yeah, I sat down and I said, what are the things that I've done that are interesting that I could put into this book? I've been the guy who's gotten sponsorships. I've worked with over 1,600 brands up to this point of getting ready to write this book. What if I offered a sponsorship on every page of the book and on the covers and inside flaps, and basically crowdfunded, my book before I wrote it? And I did it, and it was really hard. It wasn't as easy as I probably made it look because
No, a book is a nightmare to write. I can tell you, I've written 13 books, and each time I say to myself, I am never going to do this again, and then 6 months later, I write another book.
Well, I think I can speak for everybody that we're glad that you keep writing books because I'm just
Thank
like
you.
halfway through Choose Yourself, and it's awesome. I mean, it's awesome. It's a great book. But yeah, I mean, so what's funny for me is that the process of writing the book wasn't anywhere near as hard as it was to get 204 companies on board as sponsors. I actually wrote the book in 2 weeks, probably faster than most authors write it, and maybe that's reflective in the book itself, and it's not a great read that's going to be on any bestseller list, but I don't know. I'm really happy with it. I've had some really great response from it, but the
I
sponsorship
enjoyed
angle
it.
of it.
I enjoyed reading it. I thought it was well done, and I think you've solved a lot of problems that many beginning entrepreneurs have. I think it's a really impressive book.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things where and I want to tell people this, that I sent over 1,200 emails, me personally, 1,200 personal emails to land 204 sponsors in this book. And so where people might think like, oh, you've got a big network and you've got a big audience. No, I put in the work. And if you know that it takes about a minute to write an email, that's 1,200 minutes. And again, we know I'm not a math whiz, so I can't break that down into hours for you. But that was a lot of time spent just responding to people who were interested, explaining to them how this would work. But I was very fortunate. I made $75,000 writing this book, or getting sponsorships for this book before I wrote a single word or sold a single copy of the book. So I basically wrote myself a book advance and made money on a book when people are saying you can't make money on writing books.
And do you have a sense yet on how the ads are working for any of the people who sponsored a page?
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't done a lot of due diligence and followed up with a lot of people. I do know that a good handful of the advertisers have sent me emails like, "Hey, Jason, like I've had a bunch of people email me." Yeah, I do know that the Inside Flap company Design Extensions, who actually built the website for Creativity for Sale, they've gotten some inquiries and stuff. And yeah, I don't know that it's been the best ROI immediately, but I think a book is, the way I thought about it was it's a captive ROI, right? It's one of the few things we have left in life where you're not holding your phone while you're doing it. You're staring at a book and you're reading it and you're in it. So I just think that these companies, if they're going to be around for a while, they're going to be in my book forever. So it's a good opportunity.
I love this one ad on page 35. I pointed this out to my wife last night. I said this ad's insane. The ad is, we're pretty sure if Tupac Shakur were alive today, he'd use lessaccounting.com as his small business accounting software.
I love the Less Accounting guys. I'm so happy that people got creative with their ads because there's no logos, there's no QR codes. For people listening, you might think like, oh, this book's going to look like one of the money pages things you get in the mail. It's just like all these companies. It's not. They're really well designed. They're very simple. It's 140 characters, so people couldn't write their life story. But the Less Accounting guys are awesome. I love Alan and Steven. And funny enough, they actually also just started sponsoring my podcast that I have. Shameless plug. But yeah, it's fun. I had really a lot of fun reading those sponsor messages even after the book was done, because just to see how some of them even related to the pages they were on was really interesting.
Yeah, I like this one on pages 26 through I guess 31. Page 26 is knock knock. Page 27 is who's there. Page 28 is oink oink. 29 is oink oink who. Page 30 is make up your mind. Are you a pig or an owl?
I have
And
no clue who did that. So that's like the super interesting thing is like, someone created an email and never responded to it. They paid for the advertisement and they put a knock knock joke in the book. And I don't know, maybe that's just kind of their funny way of saying like, this was a silly thing to do, so I'm going to put something silly in the book, but I'm okay with it. I think it's
I
interesting.
kind of assumed that page 31, designsextensions.com, was the guy who made the knock knock joke.
It wasn't them, but I think it leads perfectly to them, which is funny. So, and I think it's really interesting. I mean, even as you're sitting here looking through the book, looking at these ads, that was the point, right? Like, what advertisement do you take time to look at, James, in anything that you do in your life where you actually notice it? And we don't. I mean, when we see commercials, we mute them, we fast forward through them. When you don't, no one pays attention to billboards. We flip past magazine ads. I mean, anything, display ads on websites, no one looks at them and actually takes time. And I've created that in multiple projects throughout my life, and I'm really proud of that. And I don't think it's a sustainable, scalable thing I can keep doing, but it's gotten me from point A to B to C, and I've just really enjoyed, as stressful as it's been and as hard as it's been throughout the years. I feel really kind of fulfilled in that I've been able to do that.
Well, and you say, I underline this, you say on page 38, whether my financial situation was great or not so fantastic, I always tried to remind myself that at least I was in control of my life and running my own business the way I wanted, the way I wanted to run it. So I really think that's important. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm not an entrepreneur," but all you did was you essentially sold your body. I hate to put it in this prostitute sort of way, but you sold the shirt off your back, and you generated revenues of $1 million. You had a business. You had ideas. You generated expenses. You made probably all the mistakes many first-time entrepreneurs made, but you lived life the way you wanted to. You did something creative and fun and exciting. It got your name out there, and I think it now your brand, if I'm going to call it that, and I hate to use your name as a brand, but you've done this thing where, okay, I'm going to sell the shirt off my back. I'm going to sell my name. I'm going to sell the bottom page of my book. So you have this creative side of you where you're selling inventory where nobody has ever found inventory before. So I imagine you tried to scale this with people like, okay, 4 people can sell their shirts, 5 people could sell their shirts, and maybe that didn't work because they didn't have the same sense of identity searching that you had. Where actually selling the name on your shirt and your last name was incredibly meaningful to you. So maybe that's how it didn't scale in some way. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think, over the years, I really realized and no one's going to work as hard as you are on your own projects, right? That was a big thing that I realized when I started hiring people. And they were all amazing people. I mean, I don't have a bad thing to say about them. It's just none of them were going to work as hard as I was on the project that really defined who I was. And I'll bring up something that, maybe some people even are thinking about this as they're listening to this interview, is that, I've been called a sellout more times than I can count, in an Excel spreadsheet. And I think that's always funny. And I've always thought that was interesting because, like you said, you sold the shirt, you sold your body, whatever. And immediately that leads people to say you're a sellout. And I think that, every project I've done, I've been paid and I've enjoyed it. I've thoroughly enjoyed what I've done and I've controlled it and I've been paid for that. And I don't consider that selling out. What I consider selling out is when people take money for doing things that they don't like doing, like working a shitty 9-to-5 job or, starting a company and not knowing when to walk away. And I'm guilty of that. I mean, I didn't walk away probably soon enough from when I should have. But, I think so many people just have this view that, if you do things, wildly different, or if you sell something that people don't naturally sell, you're selling out, you're doing something crazy. All of my projects are completely reversible. Yeah, I might have to go to the court to change my last name, but it's not like it's a tattoo on my forehead. It's not like it's, it's something that I can't, get rid of or that's going to define me for the rest of my life.
Or even if it was a tattoo on your forehead, again, if you enjoy it and if that's what you want to do,
Sure.
then I agree very much with your definition of selling out. Like, eventually, we're all exactly the same. We're all dead. So we're all just, and most people are exactly the same long before that. You know, when they stay in those jobs where they're unhappy. So the choice is: do you choose to be the same as everyone else before you're dead, or do you try to be as different as possible until you're dead? And you've definitely made or making a strong attempt to be your own person and do your own way and to not sell out by doing what you enjoy doing. And I think that's very credible.
No, I appreciate that. I think it's a great definition as well. And I don't know. I think it's interesting because I was actually kind of getting not nervous to come on your show because I've done a lot of interview stuff and I don't get nervous for it, but I don't have like a next thing necessarily that I'm like, oh, well, go check out this thing, and I'm really, I'm kind of lost right now. And last year I went through like a big lost phase, and I came out of it, and I wrote the book, and that made me, I feel good about it. And I've got some other stuff. I've got plenty of other business stuff I'm working on, but I don't have like this thing that like wraps me all together, and that like I'm known for this guy, for this stuff, and like this is what I'm doing now and how I take that forward from here. And I don't know, I thought that was interesting. I wanted to bring it up because I think a lot of people listening that are out there probably don't know what their next thing is, or they don't have everything all put together, and you're probably the same way in some respects, and that's okay, right? You can do what you can do, and you are who you are, and you just kind of use those things and go forward and see where kind of life takes you next.
And to address that, nobody can predict the future.
Hmm.
So people can't even predict tomorrow's weather, and yet they try to predict where their career is going to be 6 months, 5 years, 10 years out, and it's impossible. So
Yeah.
and like you wrote, and I underline this here on page 44. Instead of seeing boundaries, learn to see opportunities to improve, to create, and to do unconventional things. So that's not necessarily a plan for 6 months from now. That's a plan for today. So
Right.
so I always tell people, come up with ideas today, and that's how you're going to start to kind of figure out what tomorrow is going to look like. Tomorrow is only going to be based on the thoughts that you think today and nothing else. You're not going to suddenly think new thoughts tomorrow, unless you kind of pave the way today for those thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think the other thing there too that I've realized over the years is that you need help, right? And I've always tried to do things myself, and I think that's because of, a lot of my childhood and the way that I grew up, and I didn't have a strong father figure, so that's probably leads into a lot of that in our therapy session we're having here. But I think it's really, for me, last year I started asking for help, and I started to say like I can't do all this on my own. I've tried. I went into debt. Like I didn't understand finances enough, and I had to learn that the hard way. And that's it's good to have those things happen because you learn from them and you won't repeat those mistakes, hopefully. And you know this very well. And I felt like I finally started to ask for help from people when I really needed it, and that's been huge for me. And that can be helping just finding ideas, right? Find someone that you can collaborate with, who you can brainstorm, or you can just shoot the shit with, and they're not gonna belittle you or criticize you, or give you too much feedback that is going to make you feel offended. You're going to feel like you can trust them, and you can lead you to your next thing or whatever that is. And so that's what I've been doing for getting myself out of this kind of lost phase, is just starting to lean on people and do different projects and kind of see where the road takes me.
Well, and you talk about this. You talk about for people should form a trust circle. So who's your circle of people that you trust and you could bounce ideas off of, and who maybe have the skills to help you, or that you could ask advice from? And I think everybody should build a trust circle.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have my trust circle, certainly.
Yeah, and I think it's great because they'll give you, real feedback. They're not just gonna, I love my mom to death, but if I take any idea to her, she's probably gonna say, okay, you can do that. She's my mom, right? So you got to find people who will give
Oh,
you
you have
some
a much
pushback.
better mom than me then. My mom would say, "You don't do that. Just get a job."
Well, I think my mom's been worn down over the years with the I Wear Your Shirt thing, with the last name sale, with the book. At this point, she's just like, all right, whatever this guy's going to do, this kid of mine, he's going to do it. Yeah, but I think it's really important. And I'm a very much not ask for help, very proud person. And after, going through some lows last year, like I mentioned, and I talk about in the book a lot, asking people for help it was huge for me, and it was really hard, but it really led to some great things, and just kind of turned stuff around for me.
Yeah, so I mean, I even see it, in the book, and it's funny actually. Like this is the first time we've ever spoken, but
Yep.
it's funny. Again, we're talking about the 1 degree of separation. You have on the back cover Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a friend of mine. You've talked about Chris Brogan, who's a friend of mine. The cover of your book was designed by the guys who built my comic book. But I have the strangest 2 degree of separation with you. You mentioned Peter Shankman from Help a Reporter Out,
Yep.
and he was a great help to you, I guess, at some point in getting press.
Yeah, actually, I paid Peter about $18,000 in the first 2 years of Ira Your Shirt to buy ads for Haro. So Haro, however you say it. Yeah, it was great. I mean, I basically I people paid me to advertise, and then I paid Peter to advertise. What I was doing. So him kind of getting me in that space and sharing my project with people was very helpful.
So and so here, so I don't know Peter at all, but here's the weird 2 degree of separation. So before I met Claudia, my wife, this is early 2009 or late 2008. I was obsessively on JDate trying to meet somebody online, and there was this one girl who I really wanted to meet, and we kept kind of making suggested day, but then she would totally blow me off. And finally, I figured, forget it. She clearly doesn't want to meet me, and it's because she was probably already dating Peter Shankman, who she married and now has a kid with.
This world is so small. It's so funny. We think we live in this like ever expansive space where there's so many people, but like you said, we've never talked before, and we have more connections. And this happens probably with so many people until you start talking about it. But that's hilarious. I love that. And I didn't mean to laugh at the fact that you were on JDate. I just, like I've seen pictures of you and Claudia, and like, I just think it's funny to picture you, having to use JDate when I just don't imagine you needing it. But it's funny.
I met Claudia on JDate.
That's awesome. Well, and that's a testament to like online dating, right? I mean, I think this is another interesting thing. I mean, I love my girlfriend to death. We live together. I think we're going to be partners for life, hopefully. But if I had to go online and date right now, and this is completely tangential, but I would use online dating. It's a great way to filter, going, to the bars or whatever. You're not going to find the right person.
Sure.
But yeah, it's awesome. I'm very happy to hear that it worked out well for you.
So okay, so you've done. You say you don't know what the next thing is, so let's brainstorm some ideas, and let me just throw some stuff at you. First off, why don't you've built the whole infrastructure for changing the name and for auctioning it off and for generating a good amount of money. Like, take any grad student in the world or 22-year-old in the world, if they could make 70,000 a year selling their name, or even 40,000 a year selling their name, they would do it. Why don't you find 5 people who have to apply to get positions to sell their last name, and then you'll take care of all the publicity for them, combined with their own network and strengths.
So when the first auction finished, I had probably a flood of a couple hundred emails of people that were like, "I want to sell my last name. I want to do all these things," and I actually saw it as a business opportunity, and I was like, "Whoa, light bulb moment! I should become a broker for people's last names, or like a last name pimp, whatever you want to call it." And then I thought about, okay, this is interesting, but this is actually the same exact thing that happened with Ira Your Shirt, where I would get hundreds of people that applied every year, and we had applications for people to become official T-shirt wearers, and we would pay them to do that. And it didn't scale the same way, because at the end of the day, people were always buying because it was me, not necessarily just because of the idea. Because I brought a bit of social following, I brought a bit of notoriety. I had the connections to get media outlet stuff, and so I could probably do that with a couple people, but I don't think it's a scalable thing. And honestly, it's not something I'm passionate about, right? I mean, selling other people's names is not something I would like to bring up at a conference when people go, "What do you do?" I would kind of feel like a sleazeball, to be honest. But I've definitely thought about it, and I still, to this day, I get like a random email every week of someone saying like, "I want to sell my last name. Do you think it'll work?" And I just tell people, go for it. I don't care. People might call you a copycat, but if you can make it happen, make it happen. And I just don't think it's one of those things that will continue to scale, going forward.
Well, okay. So there's an interesting thing there, and I dealt with this. So I started this company, StockPicker.com, in 2006, and true to myself, I did not do any competitive research at all. And after I'd already spent like maybe 10,000 or so, on designs and starting a site and everything, I realized there were actually four major competitors that were already done and finished and up and running, and I was nowhere near up and running yet. And I literally started to cry. But what I realized after I started my business is that I had the passion to do this site and nobody else had the passion to do this site. And so they all failed and I succeeded. I had like 1 million users a month to my site. And the reason is because I was the one with the passion. It really boils down to the entrepreneur. This is where the idea, I don't want to say ideas are a dime a dozen because we already refuted that, but this is where the person himself or herself is much more important than the idea.
Right. And I think you bring up an amazing point there in that, like, so many times I've created these ideas and I've done, almost no research. I mean, like we said, the last name I joked about going to the second or third page of Google, like that's the extent of the research that I do. I honestly think that's kind of powerful when you're creating stuff. And so I'm actually working on building a new business, which is a really boring kind of SaaS product. But I just want to try it because I've never tried anything in that space, and it's solving a problem that I had, and then people said they wanted it, so I'm doing it. But I actually tried to not look at any ways any other company was doing it because I thought I don't want to adopt their bad habits into my business, even if those habits don't look bad on the surface. I want to do it the way that I want to do it, in the way that I've done all my projects, and see if it works that way. And then maybe I can learn from some of the stuff that they've done. And maybe that's a bad way to look at things, but sometimes I feel like we get so caught up in copying someone else's, or Austin Kleon, steal like an artist. I think there are little things you can steal and inspiration and that type of stuff. But so many times, that's why yours worked. It wasn't because you copied everybody's thing perfectly. It's because Stock Picker was the way that you wanted to do it and the way that you thought it would work, and it ended up working, right? And I think that for so many people, they want to start their own business or their own thing, and they get too busy in research mode, and they don't just start doing something the way that they would want to do it and that they're passionate about.
I think you're right. People get stuck in research mode, and like what you did with, selling your name, you did two levels of email. So first you wrote to the email, your basic email list. Then you built an email list of 600 people who were interested in learning about your new project. Then you emailed them. So you actually kind of asked people right away to help you out and maybe bid for your name or start your new project. Like when you go out there and you actually use your network, you do something. You're actually beginning to execute on your idea. You're beginning to build your customer base even before you have the product ready to sell.
And
I think that's a very important lesson, actually. Like I think Noah Kagan said on the podcast I did with him, if he wanted to start a restaurant, he, rather than like renting out a big space and hiring a chef and doing all this, the first thing he would do is invite 30 of his friends over, charge them $30 each, cook meals for them, and see what they like.
Yeah, I love Noah. I listened to that episode, and I think it's one of the best episodes that you've had on this show. And
it's been
and
a very popular episode.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and it's just Noah's a real guy, right? And I think he went through a lot of things that I kind of went through, and I actually leaned on him. He's in my trust circle for, in full transparency. And I don't know if he knows that, but now he does. And, and I think it's such an interesting thing where we just get so caught up in trying to like build the business plan and do all these things and all this stuff. And I even had someone comment on Facebook yesterday on this business that I'm building for this SaaS product. And he was like, well, what are your goals? How can we help you? And I'm like, listen, I really appreciate that you want to help. And I see where you're going with this, but making goals is like making revenue projections, right? I mean, they're worthless until you actually start doing something. And yeah, it's great to have things that you can try and strive for, but until you actually put it out there and get people to put their money where their mouth is and buy the thing or do whatever, you don't need to worry about the rest of that stuff, at least in my experience. And maybe that's because I'm not building, $100 million companies that, make big impacts or change. But the stuff that I'm working on, that I think most people are working on, just start doing it. Just start taking action with it.
Yeah, and it's so let's brainstorm again. So you can't sell inventory on people's last names, but you do have this clever aptitude for finding ad inventory where nobody else has looked. Like I've never seen a book with ads on the bottom of every page. I've never seen someone auction off their last name. I've never seen someone auction off a shirt a day that they would wear. So it's very clever. What about things where you normally don't see inventory? So for instance, let's say
a big employment agency and I write a million checks. Let's say I'm a big temp agency like Manpower, and I write, 5 million checks a month. Well, there's 5 million pieces of ad inventory to sell, and it can be highly targeted as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and I think this boils down to the discussion that we had about passion, right? And I think trying to and I've done this. I mean, I've tried to shoehorn sponsors into projects and advertisers into projects, so many times. I mean, I've done tons of other stuff that's not even near the success of the ones that we mentioned, and I think that what it comes back to for me is that it was never really because I had this like interest in working with all these companies. It was more that like I just like telling stories, and where I got started with telling stories was telling other brand stories. And so now, I'm kind of in this place where I like doing projects, but I like even more telling the story of that project. And so, I don't know how that fits into things, and right now I'm just being fully transparent on building this next project. And I'm kind
What
of
is the next project? So it's a SaaS product. Like, what does it sell?
It's going to help people build online courses. And and actually I'm going like the simplicity route, and there's Skillshare and there's Udemy and there's all these things that help you build courses, but I built one platform that is completely skinnable. It's based on one framework, so you can't change it. The colors can be changed, the content can be changed, but I've just found that like when there's too many options and when people try and build your course for you, I don't know, it didn't seem to make sense for me. So again, it's not a sexy product, but I think it solved a problem for me, and everybody that I showed it to that might be working on an online course was like, I need this. Like, this is so much less bloated than every other thing that's out there. How can I get my hands on this now? And so I started building it. But what I've done with my email list is every week I'm telling them, here's exactly what I'm doing with this project. I'm sharing all the details, what my co-founder is working on, who's the technical guy. I'm basically just kind of the thoughts and the marketing and kind of the experience on it, and we're just going through and sharing it. And I don't love necessarily building the product, but I love sharing the process of how the product is being built and the struggles that we're facing and all the things that we're going through to kind of get it to its next steps. I don't know how that becomes a profitable thing, but
Well, here's for instance what I need. Okay, so in terms of that, so let's say I build a course under Udemy or Coursera or whatever. It's under that umbrella, and I
exactly.
don't necessarily want to brand a course under Coursera. I might want to brand a course under JamesAltucher.com. Like,
Yep.
here's the Choose Yourself course under JamesAltucher.com, and have no mention of Udemy or Coursera or whatever. Will you be able to do? Will your product be able to do that?
Yep, that's exactly what we want to do. So
So that's a great idea, I think.
yeah, and so I'll give credit to Fedora. They're a company that's used Fedora.com.
Well, I just full disclosure, I'm an investor and use Fedora.
Oh, nice. So they do some of that already, but again, I don't know. I looked at Fedora and the pricing was a little bit high for what I was looking for, and I think it's
What?
great, but
No.
and I was just I was like, I want to do it where there's no price per user, there's no price per amount of courses. It's a limited users, a limited courses. We're not going to host any content, so it doesn't cost us anything to set these things up. All we're going to do is just give you a skinnable thing. And like I said, I mean, I don't think the building of SaaS products is like what I want to do. I think it's just sharing with people the story of taking on a project and here's what I'm doing and here's how you can follow along. And I've helped a lot of people over the years. I mean, you mentioned the guy Jason Marco, who's the artist, and he's incredibly talented. But I've really helped him understand the business side of it and how we built it and how to tell his story and how to get it out there and to do it in an interesting way. And I've helped lots of people do that over the years. And consulting is not something that I'm necessarily in love with because it's again not a scalable thing. And the reason why I keep bringing up that things aren't scalable is because I've done so many projects that haven't been scalable that I'm trying to find places where I can make money and I don't have to be working every second of the day to make that money. And then I can, the passive income in quotes, get that going with some project that maybe isn't as sexy or as crazy that's going to get New York Times exposure, and then play around with other stuff, right? And have fun doing other things. And then just not build a 9-to-5 job for myself, because that's really what I did over the years too, that I realized was I'm now working every single day, but yet I'm working for myself. Why am I like constraining myself to work 7 days a week, 9 hours a day? Well, not 7 days a week, but for the most part.
You were working 7 days a week with the T-shirt thing.
Right. And I burned myself out after working 889 days straight, and thinking that I could be superhuman and never take a day off because I loved what I was doing. But yeah, it just doesn't work that way. And it just like now I don't take calls on Friday. I barely work on Friday. On the weekends, I pretty much try and like laze around. And now that football season's on, like I'm Sunday, like you're not even gonna see me on technology. And so it's just I've really realized that we become entrepreneurs and we become business owners and people have said this before, but you create a new 9 to 5 for yourself and you become your own worst boss, because you do these things. And I'm just trying to get away from that, and do that. And this is not to discredit your brainstorming because I am incredibly appreciative of it. And I think it's fun. Just kind of giving you my perspective on what I'm thinking about.
No, what's interesting to me though is that you have to stay true to your core. And what was happening with you, it seems like your business was very much all of your businesses have been very much related to your very extremely personal quest for identity.
Yep.
Like, the multiple fathers, your mom getting literally your mom telling you she was getting a divorce triggered immediately your new business, which was sell by your last name, which
Yeah.
generated, some profit for you. It was a nice little profit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I just need to keep going through like, the ups and downs of life to keep having projects kind of fall on my lap. But it's like you said, we can't predict the future. We
Well,
don't
well,
know.
what happened though was, so you built these different businesses and it builds up a core skill set. So now okay, how to get some press, how to do an auction, how to build an e-commerce site, how to how to have a profitable business versus an unprofitable business, which
Yeah.
is you can only learn from failing at one business and then going into another.
Yeah,
So
which is why I think and this is a whole other topic of discussion, but like our education system and trying to teach people how to be entrepreneurs, and I just think it's a complete joke because there's no risk involved when you're in like a college system or in any system where you're trying to learn how to take risk. Until your money is being put out there and your skin is in the game, you're not going to learn anything. And I think that there's just a true sense of people think that they can learn how to become business owners in a class or in a secure space. And until you actually put your money where your mouth is and you build something and it fails and you have struggle and you do these things, you're not going to learn that stuff. And that's where I was 6 years ago. I mean, I totally thought that I could just, learn this stuff and do it. And it was until I started actually doing it that, everything really changed for me. And I realized that. And I think that, even just reading and knowing some of your story, you've learned so much from your experiences, but you've also repeated stuff too. And I've done the same thing. And I don't know why we do that as human beings. Like, why do we repeat these same things over and over again? And it's until I think we have to take like a drastic change or ask for help or, do something really different that we can really kind of, do better things for ourselves.
I think the ask for help is very critical. And I also think kind of, it's like you say, we don't really know why we do these things. So the part of our brain that actually has thoughts with words is a very extremely small part of our overall brain. So what motivated you to do a lot of these things, you might never really know kind of the deeper reasons. Like, why sell your last name and not sell ad inventory on 5 million checks a month, for instance? Well, you're
Right.
not interested in one and you're interested in the other for reasons that go quite deep. So the question is, and I'll pose this to you, even though there's no solid answer. How does somebody in general, someone's in the cubicle, but they're unhappy. They'd like to figure out something a little more entrepreneurial. They're not going to create Facebook or SpaceX or whatever. They just want to have like what you described on page 38, more freedom in their lives. How do they start to begin on the path of finding out what they might be passionate about? What's their core so they can start doing like what you did?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is a question that I actually talk with a lot of people about, and I think that it comes down to writing down a list of things that you're passionate about, and then basically ranking those on where will you put a lot of effort into, right? And it's that Mark Cuban code of, don't follow your passion, follow your effort. And I think that where you can meet in the middle on those things, especially when you're working a 9 to 5 job or you're, working for somebody else, it's to find something that you're passionate about that you can work on and then take action on it, right? Like, don't do a bunch of research for months. Don't do a bunch of planning just build something incredibly small and just do it. and learn from that experience. You may never use that business again. That thing may be a terrible failure, but until you actually do something, you're never going to take the next step forward. And so, I kind of have this thing where I talk about, taking action, and you're either going to have success or fail with that action, right? And whatever that means, so that definition is for you. If you have success, repeat that thing and try and scale it. If you have failure, okay, analyze why that failed, maybe get feedback from other people, and then adjust that and move forward. And I think that's just a really important way for anybody trying anything is to not get sucked into, oh, I don't know if it's going to work, and I'm afraid to try something, and I don't want to make a mistake. So what? You're not going to get anywhere if you don't actually do something and you don't actually take action and try and make something new for yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was reading some of your different ideas, it made me think of a business I tried to start, I guess in like 2007 or 2006. It was called, I called the idea Jungle Smash. I don't know why I picked that name. And the idea was I was going to crowdsource ads. So I picked up a major brand like Crest, and I didn't get Crest permission or anything. And I said, I'm going to give $1,000 to whoever makes the best Crest ad and uploads it to YouTube and links to it here on this site. And I had the site junglesmash.com at the time. And something like 20 or 30 people uploaded videos. And even Procter & Gamble, which owns Crest, uploaded some videos. And they wanted to talk to me about it. And so then the next one was for Monster drink, the energy drink. And I thought it might be an interesting business, but, and the idea was I was going to auction off the slot. So whoever wanted to be the next thing that I would crowdsource would have to pay. So maybe a brand would pay me, $50,000 to be in the next month's auction or a crowdsourced commercial. But what happened is that it's not that the business failed, because I think if I kind of hustled, I could have done something there. It's just that I completely lost interest and I didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times,
and it's not like I was so wealthy I could have said, who cares? Like, it would have been nice for that business to work.
well, and I think a lot of times I've realized this about myself is that we're afraid to let go, right? We invest the time to start something and to build something, and then it's like, oh, well, I can't let this thing go because, X, Y, or Z. And I feel like, you have to be willing just to say, this was a mistake, or this was, it doesn't have to be labeled a mistake. This was the thing that I did, and I don't want to do it anymore, and now I need to move forward. And a lot of times we just force ourselves to keep doing things that we don't want to be doing. And I've been there. I mean, even in like the I Wear Your Shirt thing, I probably should have stopped 2 years prior, but it wouldn't have led me to where I was, and that's okay. But it's just, you have to figure out for you when the time is to let go and to move on. And it's really hard. It's not easy to do that, but you could get yourself down a path where then it's harder for you to get out of and start your next thing.
So it's hard for people to know, like sometimes there are difficulties and you have to get through those difficulties, as opposed to saying, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think it takes experience to really know, you know what, this is not for me.
Right. And what's the difference there too, right? There's a big difference in, I don't want to do this because it's hard, and I don't want to do this because it's not bringing me any value anymore, right? I mean, there's two different approaches there, and I think that you and I are both of the mindset that we'll work as hard as we can on something, and until our fingers are bleeding. But if it's not bringing me value and I'm not enjoying it, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to jungle smash any more videos.
Yeah, no. And I thought somebody else I gave the idea away and someone else tried to start it. I don't know whatever happened with it. So what you're building you're building this SaaS product for online courses. I love the idea. I love the idea so much I'm invested in your competitor, your more expensive competitor. But let me know if you ever want an introduction to them, because I'm happy to make that introduction. And when did the book come out, Creativity for Sale? What was the exact day?
June 3rd of this year.
So I highly recommend it, because not only for the stuff we talked about, but I think there's a lot of things in general, I think, for good basic online entrepreneurship, like how to create a landing page, how to essentially get that funnel to the landing page, how to get your first users, how to build up initial press.
and and you interweave it with your story, which is why I think, like you say, you don't know whether this is a good book or not. But here's what I think a good book is. It's when you entertain and provide value at the same time. So you told your personal story, you have a lot of transparency, like you tell how you met your girlfriend, like you have embarrassing moments, you kind of are very revealing in here, and you educate. Like I think it's a good guide to how to start a basic online business that everybody should get. Like people ask me all the time, where do I go? How do I start an online business? Okay, buy this book, Creativity for Sale, and it's going to tell you how. So I
Yeah.
think it's a good book.
I really appreciate that, James. I mean, it means a lot. I know that this is the first time we ever chatted, as we've mentioned before, and that those types of recommendations, I know are very important from you, and I thank you for that. And the book for me is it was an exciting project because I'd never done it before, and it was very difficult on the sponsorship side of it. Not necessarily on the writing side because I had roundtable companies and they were amazing. But I kind of look forward to writing another book, and I'm not sure if I'll repeat the sponsor thing. It seems like when I have a successful project, I tend to try and repeat it at least one other time. So maybe I'll do that. But yeah, right now I'm just, I'm enjoying kind of putting the book out there in the world. It's not as easy to get a book in front of a lot of people as I probably was when you were on Amazon a couple of years ago. But I'm just very excited for the people who've read it so far and have emailed me and have taken fun photos with it. And yeah, it's been really fun.
Yeah, and it's funny, like even, again, like I'm amazed how many people you mention in this book that I know. Like how come actually seriously, how come we haven't met before?
I
Do
don't
you
know.
do you not go like I don't really leave New York City that much. Maybe you don't go to New York a lot.
I come to New York, once or twice a year. But that's really, yeah, it's interesting that we haven't met before. And I think it's funny when bring back Noah's podcast real quick, when he said he emailed you and you never emailed him back, I was dying laughing because I just thought that was funny. Like I think I kind of knew that about you, and I was just like, I could reach out to James, but I don't know if he's going to reply, and he's a busy guy, so and I don't have any value to offer you, so it would just be me being like, hey man, what's going on? Let's just chat.
It's funny. I got an email last night from somebody who I hadn't emailed with in about a year, and she was very upset, like that I hadn't emailed her in a year, and I didn't even think about it during that year. Like it wasn't. It's just that I've been busy. But she was very insulting. Like you haven't emailed or responded to my emails in a year. And look, I tried to respond to emails, but as you know, sometimes it's difficult, or I'm lazy, or I focus on my writing projects and my podcasting, so it becomes a choice of where you put your time. And but it like I felt bad with when I said that to Noah. I didn't remember his email, but I always try to look at my emails and see what's there, but I don't. Unfortunately, I don't. I have to make a choice. I don't always respond to emails.
Yeah, and that's it's one of those things too where I think if I had a reason to get connected to you, I would have gone like 6 different ways to try and get connected to you, and I'm sure it would have worked in some way. And I think that's a lesson for anybody. If you want something badly enough, don't just send one email, right? And I'm a firm believer in the follow-up email. I mean, I'll send follow-up emails until I'm blue in the face and until I've pissed somebody off, because if I want something badly enough, I'll go and get it. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting you bring up email. I was like, email was such a burden for me. I mean, I was attached to my inbox like crazy, and I'm still kind of attached to it, and I'm trying to detach a bit. And social media was the same thing for me. I built my entire life on social media, in 2008 and 9. And so I've really tried to let go of these things, and it's tough, but they're like drugs. They really are. You're like addicted to them. And when you can finally wean yourself off, you realize, oh wow, I can spend time building things, writing things, helping other people, doing things I really enjoy, and not just refreshing feeds and looking at notifications and reading emails from a lot of people who are just emailing because they want to make a quick buck doing something that you've done.
Well, the thing I do is if I you know through experience, and we all know what that addictive feeling feels like. Oh, I've got to check my Twitter Connect, or I got to check my Facebook feed or my email. And so whenever I start feeling that way, I say, look, I'm going to replace this feeling with I'm going to sit down with a notebook or a book, and I'm going to try to be creative. And I always try to replace creativity with any of those addictions. And some of those addictions might be, oh, I'm angry at somebody, or I feel like I should call somebody. All of these things are addictions that I try to replace with just my creativity, because again, one of these days I'm not going to be here anymore, and
I'm going to have two legacies. I'm going to have my children, and I'm going to have kind of the things that I created.
Yeah.
And my emails are going to be gone. Like those are going to disappear.
They definitely are, and I'm surprised that they're still in existence with everything that we're doing. But yeah, it's a really good point, and I think that we just get so caught up in it, and it's so hard to let go of these things because there is such a mental, like, chemical response to the reaction that we get out of this stuff, and it's weird because it didn't exist 15 years ago, right? I mean, we all lived lives before that didn't involve any of these things, and now we're incessantly, like, I'm surprised our thumbs don't all have blisters from the amount of time we spend scrolling and clicking and doing things. And there is a whole big world out there that can entertain you and bring you value and do stuff. And I'm saying this as someone who is getting over this myself. You know, I'm not trying to be preachy. I'm trying to reiterate to myself as well. So yeah, I think that's really important.
So final question. Later today, I have to interview Coolio, the rapper. You know who he is?
Yes, of course.
So he made that song "Gangster's Paradise." It was the top hit of all genres in 1995, and I have no clue what to ask him. So
You should ask him about Cooking with Coolio, his YouTube series. Did you ever see
okay,
that?
I've watched that series. It's completely insane, and the
It
food
is.
looks horrible.
It
So
does.
I'm almost a little nervous bringing it up, but I am going to ask him about the transformation from rapper to chef, of course. But
Yes.
I think that show was made a little bit tongue in cheek, so I'm not sure. We'll see.
That's true. I look forward to listening to that one. And if I could, everyone I think always asks, like, what's one thing you want people to do? Not my selfish ask, but something for your listeners. If they have not listened to Ramit's episode with you, I shared this on Facebook and I shared it on Twitter. It's probably one of the best podcast interviews, even with some audio glitches in it, as you already know,
Yeah.
that I've ever listened to. I listened to it on a drive to Orlando, and seriously, there's so much great stuff in there. I had so many, like, light bulb moments, and I think that if people haven't listened to that interview of yours, I would unbelievably highly recommend it because I think it's just amazing.
Yeah, no, Ramit and I've been on Ramit's Brain Trust podcast before that his subscribers get, and we have a good kind of like we've done some good work together, and we've done, I think, now 3 podcasts together, and they've always been a lot of fun because he's got he's got a good sense of humor. He's done a lot of stuff. It's always interesting. It's funny, I have kind of a lot of I don't want to call them like, I hate the word celebrity, but I have like household name guests, but I
Mm-hmm.
always find the most valuable guests I have are people like, not that you're not a household name, but you, Noah, Ramit, all these people who have done a lot of like hard work and are willing to share it and create value. Like what we've talked about and what is mentioned in your book can actually help free people from the grind. So that's why, again, I recommend people read this Creativity for Sale. And, I hope people get it and start their own businesses and find that freedom that you're finding.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and I, as a listener and now someone who's been on the show, I mean, I appreciate your authenticity, and I hope that you never let anybody, bring you down. And you talk about this in all of your stuff anyway, but I know that it probably creeps in your head of doubt on stuff that you share, and I know I get so much value, and I know there's a lot of people out there to do that. So please don't ever stop doing that because you're an inspiration to the little guys like me. And I'm willing to bet that I think Cooking with Coolio is going to be a big listen for your audience. So I look forward to listening to that one. And I really do thank you for your time, James. It's really appreciated.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jason. I really appreciate that. Thanks.
Take care.
For more from James, check out the James Altucher Show on the Stansberry Radio Network at stansberryradio.com and get yourself on the free insiders list today.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever, It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.